Hey, everybody, I'm John Halpin. Welcome to the Tuesday, August 18th edition of the Fox Sports of Fantasy Google Hangout and Fantasy 15 podcast. I'm here with my buddy Jake Ciely, who I last saw at the Flex Standard Draft in Washington, D.C. last weekend. First, Jake, the question on everybody's mind, how did you like my 3 wide receiver start in the Standard League draft?
I gotta say, I was actually surprised by it. I'll say this: the draft overall was a little bit surprising because after doing the PPR, to see wide receivers go as quick as they did in the Standard, I think just kind of talks to the fantasy landscape in general that guys are more willing to rely on the trustworthy wide receivers. That being said, I was surprised that you went 3 straight. I thought after 2 you were certain to take a running back in round 3. So when that happened, I was just like, oh, all right, go ahead. All right, John, let's see how this works out. It's basically you were the one person who really went 0 RB. There's a couple teams you could kind of say maybe did, but you're the one true team, and I think that's where it pays off, is if you're the one or maybe second team that doesn't, but if you got 3 or 4 teams doing 0 RB, you're going to end up in the same boat, scrambling for the same guys all year long.
Right. So all my eggs are in Andre Ellington's basket right now is the way things worked out. So we'll see how that goes. All right. We're going to start off. First, if you like this podcast, everybody, please subscribe on iTunes and SoundCloud. We'd love that. So we don't have to keep reminding you when these are ready. You'll just know. And we're going to have a foxsports.com fantasy YouTube channel soon. We're going to be broadcasting on there. We'll let you know all the details about that. Also, Twitter, Jake's at AllInKid, as you can see on the screen when he pops up. I'm at JHalpin37. If you have any questions, both of us like to answer them. First up, first on your list, C.J. Anderson, first overall, which is certainly unusual. We joked at the draft about how you've been jinxing people. But seriously, talk about why you like C.J. Anderson so much.
First of all, you can look at his last 8 games, actually 9 if you include the playoffs last year, just to see how good he was. And it's not just C.J. Anderson. Lately, if you go back to preseason last year, he wasn't the guy that was supposed to start because of Monte Ball, because they drafted him, C.J. Anderson. Obviously wasn't the high draft pick like they had on the team, but there was a lot of beat reporters, including Cecil Lammey, who I paid close attention to for anything Broncos, was saying he was the most talented running back. He just wasn't the name. And it took a couple games of the season, but we saw how talented he could be. On top of that, the reason everybody loved Monte Ball last year was because it's the running back next to Peyton Manning. Everybody wants the – I mean, right. we talked about it in the preseason last year. You just put the numbers. You put a blank name and the numbers of the running backs next to Peyton Manning, and they're always RB1. So all the excitement for Monte Ball should carry over to C.J. Anderson, but it's not, because everybody's a little bit scared that he might lose the touches to somebody else. Jawan Thompson might vulture. There's not a clear case, but I think it's the exact opposite. I think Gary Kubiak not only has said he loves a bell cow, we know he loves a bell cow. I keep saying this, Arian Foster in his 2 seasons where he actually played 16 games under Gary Kubiak had 326 and 351 carries. That's not touches, that's carries. And even if I project out C.J. Anderson to 280, 290 for carries, let's just say they still pass a decent amount. Maybe some other guys get mixed in a little bit. So he's not even going to hit 300. I still have him getting 13 to 1,400 yards with double-digit touchdowns. You put all that together, I think there's a case for obviously the top pick in the draft, potentially even better than that, because I'm not even projecting him at what his ceiling could be. If I took those 9 games from last year, like, a lot of people want to do, forget about it. We'd be talking about one of the all-time great seasons ever, but I'm not that crazy.
Okay, so let's say you're in a league and let's say your draft is this Saturday and you get the number 1 pick and you're able to trade down. How far down do you trade if you really want C.J. Anderson? How far down are you willing to go?
If it's me personally, I'd probably stop at 6, because I think there's 4 running backs and Antonio Brown. The 4 running backs, I think Eddie Lacy, Jamal Charles, Adrian Peterson, Le'Veon Bell. I could see pretty much every draft those 4 running backs going before C.J. Anderson. I think that's pretty much the consensus out there before people even start to think about C.J. Anderson. So I would probably stop at 6, because I think Antonio Brown has a good case to go past him as well, obviously, especially if it's a PPR league. That's not even a question. But in a standard, I think that's where I would hold off, because I wouldn't want to trade down to 8 and then watch him go 7 and be like, oh, I could have just had it like our draft. I had pick number 4. If you want him, you're going to have to take him.
Right. Okay. Next up, another running back, Ameer Abdullah. Ameer Abdullah, I don't know if his bust is being set for Canton yet after his first preseason game. But look, I liked it. I remember watching him before the draft. I was watching stuff on running backs, and I'm like, you watch the guy. He's hard not to like. I mean, you watch him in college. He looks great. He's not a tall guy. He's fast. Not straight away fast as much as quick, good feet, all that stuff. Supposedly fumble issues in college, and not supposedly, he had fumble issues in college. But the way things are working now, I kind of thought a couple of weeks ago, you know what, 6th round, maybe sneaking into the 5th, Ameer Abdullah looks fine. Well, now the helium's gotten under him, and he's going up into 4th, I guess. He's really, I mean, he's a nice back. You've got him 18th on your running back rankings, which is higher than most people. Did you move him much or at all after the first preseason game?
No, I didn't. Actually, that's the same spot I had him before week 1 of the preseason, because I even talked about it. I got my ranks up on the site today, and the first thing I lead it off with is I barely changed anybody. There was a few I did for injuries, situations like that. Like Kevin White obviously was a huge drop in my list. But most of all, maybe if there was an offensive line issue or something like that. But overall, week 1 means nothing to me with my rankings. Very little matters to me actually in the preseason as general, unless you're talking about battles for backup positions or even starting jobs. Those type of things is where I'll move rankings. I love Ameer Abdullah for a couple of reasons. Is not only the talent, and I agree with you, you have the fumbling issues. He wasn't even one of my top 3 running backs when I came into the draft, pre-draft ranking them. So I just like the landing situation and what his talent brings to that team. Is I already had, before Joique Bell got hurt, I had him as an RB3. When Joique Bell did get hurt, I moved him up to RB2. Not only to the fact that I think that maybe Bell isn't 100% to start the season, or maybe even if he is. I go back to the Reggie Bush and Joique Bell season of 2 years ago, where Reggie Bush was a RB1 in standard and PPR. He was actually an RB7 in PPR. Joique Bell was an RB2, both in standard and PPR. Even if you flip those and you give Bell, let's say Bell comes back 100%, they give him the lead carries, he gets more touches, and you give him those numbers. Well, if he gets Joique Bell's numbers, he's still a mid-level RB2. He's actually in the mid-teens, a little bit higher than what I have him ranked. So I have him there for 2 reasons. I see the potential. I see the upside. I think he's in a great situation. But I also think at this point, you do need to spend – it's similar to C.J. Anderson. If you want him, you're going to have to draft him in the 4th round. You're not getting him in the 5th, 6th, 7th anymore. I actually called him a sleeper 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that was when he was going around 8. That's long gone. That's not even a possibility anymore.
Right. Yeah, he's not a sleeper anymore. His price has gotten a little rich for me.
I will say that if you have to pay, to go back to the Joique Bell thing, if he was an RB14 in the PPR, if you have to pay that, I wouldn't go that high. I have him at 18. I know that sounds 4 spots. Ooh, you wouldn't go that high. But about RB14, you're taking all of the risk and leaving very little room for him to, give you return value. So I will say that.
Okay. Now, speaking of rookie running backs, you are more pessimistic than most about Todd Gurley, and it makes a lot of sense. You've got everybody's getting excited about his recovery, and then it became, well, he's not going to play in the preseason, and he said, I think, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be ready for the season opener. You seem to be you're basically checked out on Todd Gurley. Not that you think he's a flop or a failure, but there's the way where you have him ranked. There's no way you're going to get him in any drafts, and that's okay with you.
I'm not. There's not a single draft I've even sniffed him yet, just because I have him ranked in an RB4/5 a little bit, depending on where I'm going in a standard or PPR. He's in that range for me because I'll take the gamble at that point, but there's no way in heck I want him as my flex running back because you said it. He himself said he doesn't know if he's ready for week 1, and this goes back weeks. I really haven't had Gurley in the RB3 or higher range since day 1 because we don't know how much or when he's going to play. Could he be like Trey Mason, Isaiah Crowell, where he doesn't even see significant carries until week 6, 7, 8 of the season? And if that's the case, you're only getting a half season from the guy. And granted, I will say this, is he was my top-ranked rookie running back going into the draft. I said he's a generational talent. If we're talking keeper or dynasty, he's my number 1. There's no question about it. But for this year only, you just can't spend that draft cost on him because even if you get RB1 value from him at, halfway through the season, he basically has to have C.J. Anderson numbers. We talked about him earlier. He has to be C.J. Anderson from week 9 through 17 to even reach RB1 status at the end of the year. And that's a lot to ask when you already have Trey Mason there, who I was very fond of last year. He was actually tied at the top with Isaiah Crowell for me last year in pre-draft rankings for rookies. I think Trey Mason, that even if he comes back 100%, I don't see Trey Mason going away. Unless Trey Mason comes out of the gate, is completely awful, averages 2.7 yards a carry for the first 6 games, and Gurley's 100%. All right, then we have to change. But at that point, you're still saying, well, he's an RB4 with tons of upside. I don't want him to start for me. That's my biggest problem.
Okay, and you right now the ADPs, Gurley's at, I just checked Fantasy Football Calculator. Gurley's 50, which is a little lower than I thought. I thought he was going to be somewhere in the 40 or so. Trey Mason 85. So
yeah, see, I would take Trey Mason at that cost 1,000 times. There's no question to me, because who's to say? We know Trey Mason's going to be the lead guy at least for the first couple of weeks. Who's to say he's not for the entire season, and Gurley gets 35% of the shares for the entire year?
Yep. All right, next up, are you buying into this week's Doug Martin chatter? That he looks great. It's the best camp he's had. He's terrific. He's a different guy. Oh, my gosh, he's going to start. He's going to be terrific.
I got to say this. I was buying into Doug Martin before this first week even came around for actually one reason. Is you're going to go back, if you look at my stuff from last year, I called Doug Martin a bust all preseason. I said, you looked at his rookie year, he had 3 great games, and everything else was, it wasn't that great. So you got great end of the year numbers. I called them Santana Moss or running backs. You got 3 or 4 great games out of him, and everything else was just So I was extremely down on him last year, but because of what happened last year, the disappointment and the fact that he's coming into this season, everybody's ignoring him. Now he kind of turned into a value. You're talking about somebody who could be maybe a flex running back, maybe on best case even an RB2, and he's going to get the lead touches. Charles Sims is a better change of pace option. I basically have called Charles Sims 70% Matt Forte. That's his talent level. So he's good in the change of pace game. Doug Martin should be the lead guy. So there's upside, and I think that's where the value is coming from. So I'm buying in, but I was buying in already. I will say, though, that offensive line scares me to death. It was already the worst in the league, and they just lost the guy for another 6 to 10 weeks. So I'm not going to move him ahead of a flex running back. He's not going to – I would not spend an RB2 price on him in a draft.
ADP – guess the ADP. Go. Doug Martin.
For running backs?
No, overall.
Overall, I'll say 82.
57.
Whoa. That's a little high for me.
Out. Thank you.
Him and Gurley, gone.
All right. Next, we're going to move to wide receiver. There's a guy who's been a very popular breakout pick that you don't seem to be on board. And I think I'm with you, actually, but I want to hear you talk about it a little. Martavis Bryant, you've got him at 43 at wide receiver. I mean, I like the guy, and he certainly passes the eyeball test. But, there's only so many – there's only one ball there, and there's 2 guys who are going to get it a lot in Pittsburgh. I think Martavis Bryant could have a nice year. I don't know if I agree with the big step forward that some people are projecting. You don't seem to either.
And that's the biggest thing is I'm not even buying into this talk of, Marcus Wheaton's going to be the number 2. I still think Bryant's the more talented receiver, but at least the talk is there to the point of, like you said, there's only so many balls to go around, is the fact that is it going to be almost a timeshare of receivers? We usually talk about timeshares at running back, but I think this could be one of those situations where the number 2 and number 3 end up with very similar targets come the end of the year. And granted, Bryant is going to do more with his targets than Wheaton does, but still, you've got to rein in those targets. And he's not going to do what he did last year. That production, you talk about the fantasy points per target last year being 4. That's insane. That's most guys at the highest end are around 2, 2.1, 2.2 at the best. So for what he did last year, it's just not going to happen. So you bump up his targets, but he could actually have very similar numbers to last year with more targets and more receptions. So that's kind of my biggest issue and you're looking at a week to week of how much is he going to be on the field with Wheaton out there as well. Unless he actually had the number 2 job completely to himself, then we could talk about him more, but that's just not going to be the case. So I actually like him a ton in DFS, and maybe as that weekly, I would love him in a best ball league, but to be my wide receiver 3, there's no way on earth I want him as that.
Okay, another wide receiver. And we're disagreeing big on this one. Andre Johnson.
I'm going to try and convince you.
I am way out on Andre Johnson.
Way out.
Here's where I'm going to check my rankings right now because I didn't have them in front of me. when we started talking here. I have Andre Johnson at wide receiver 32.
Ooh.
You have Andre at wide receiver 12.
I
We have a bit of a difference of opinion here. I'm going to state my case. My case is not there's not a ton of data behind mine. Well, maybe there's some. He's 34 years old. And his look, I know he played on a team with bad quarterbacks, but his production has slipped. Yards per catch, stuff like that has been slipping. I tend to get off guys a year too early rather than a year too late. And if I miss out on his last good year, that's fine. But with Andre Johnson, I understand that he's with a better quarterback there, and he sort of basically, for lack of a better comparison, he slides into the Reggie Wayne role with more downfield possibilities. But again, Hilton, and there's Moncrief, and there's Dorsett, and there's Gore, and there's Allen, and there's Fleener, and there's so many people. And I'm not buying into the argument that Andre Johnson is going to have a sort of rebirth in Indianapolis, but you disagree, so go.
Yeah. Well, and I do have some numbers for mine, and I understand the age, but the first thing I'm going to do for the age is actually attack a number. Who you mentioned, the other person is Reggie Wayne. And this is the biggest thing I keep going to is Reggie Wayne and Andrew Luck's rookie season. So we're not even talking about Andrew Luck in his fourth season after just what he did last year. Talk about Reggie Wayne at the same age as Andre Johnson was his rookie season for Andrew Luck. I don't think you'll agree with this. I think everybody will agree. Andre Johnson at the same age of what Reggie Wayne was a couple of years ago is still the better talented receiver, has more to offer. So I think that's the bigger case there. Reggie Wayne was wide receiver 15 that year. He had 106 receptions, 1355, and 5 touchdowns. 2 years ago, with junk quarterbacks, Andre Johnson was wide receiver, guess what, 12. Mm-hmm. He had over 100 receptions, 1,400 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I'm saying he could do at least that for what he did just 2 years ago with terrible quarterbacks. Now he's got Andrew Luck. I actually think he does better than T.Y. Hilton. I think if anybody suffers when it comes to targets, it's actually going to be T.Y. Hilton and somewhat the tight ends. But I think that's where the drop-off comes. I have Andre Johnson above T.Y. Hilton. I think he puts up numbers at least of what he did 2 years ago. And I think he might threaten his career years back from the 2002 years. And I don't necessarily think he's going to top that or hit it. But I think if he did, it wouldn't shock me. And that's the thing is I think Andre Johnson is a legitimate wide receiver one with Andrew Luck, with the best quarterback he's ever played with. He's a Hall of Famer playing with Matt Shaw being the career year he had is the best he's ever seen. So, again, I'm more going for the fact, again, 2 years ago, with the worst quarterbacks you've ever seen, he put up wide receiver one numbers.
No, I know he did, but 2 years ago, so when you're from 32 to 34, 2 years is a long time.
Hey, Reggie Wayne at 34.
I
wide
know.
Receiver 15.
But we all don't age the same.
At least move him up to the 20s for me. At least come up a little bit.
Where do I have to go? Hold on. I got to see where I have to go. If I'm going to move him up to the 20s, he's got to go past.
You got to put him past Brandon Marshall.
All right, that's fair. Maybe I do. Now, I'm not going to do wholesale changes on my rankings here, but maybe I do need to move him past Brandon Marshall.
At least I got you agreeing a little bit.
A little. I'm agreeing. We're 20 spots apart. I might be agreeing on moving up 1 or 2. But
one or two, maybe like 5 or 6. Let's do a little bit more. I will say this too, but you made the C.J. Anderson question way earlier. The good thing about Andre Johnson is I have him there because that's where I think he'll finish. You do not have to spend that cost on him.
Right.
What's his ADP? Is like wide receiver 24?
His ADP is Andre Johnson. Where are you, Andre? You're here somewhere. His ADP is 45 overall. So
4th rounder.
Yeah, 4th round, which is I'm not willing to go there.
You're not willing? I would do that 1,000 times out of 10.
I know you would. I'm not there. I'm not
shocked
with you.
He's actually wide receiver 19 on Fantasy Pros with the consensus over there. I'm shocked he's that high. Everybody's been listening to me.
I know he's moving up. He's going to cost you more now if you want him. All right, Jake, real quick, give me a late round wide receiver and running back that you seem to be getting in a lot of drafts.
I'm going to give you a couple. I won't go into too depth of all of them, but I've been getting a lot of Michael Crabtree, a lot of Marvin Jones, and a lot of Allen Hurns for the receivers. Crabtree, I think, is getting overlooked for the potential he's there. He's still extremely talented and young. He just needs to stay healthy. Marvin Jones looked great before he got hurt. Everybody seems to forget that. Hurns, I wasn't a big fan of until Marquise Lee got hurt. Now he's the number 2 out there. And if you think Blake Bortles is going to have a decent season, Allen Hurns in the starting role could put up some real good numbers. And that running back, it's 2 rookies. It's the Davids. I've been getting a ton of David Cobb because I don't like Bishop Sankey. He wouldn't have been in my top 10 rookie running backs this year. I think Cobb takes over eventually, if not by week 1. And David Johnson, I still think he has to get on the field. I will admit that. There's a potential he could be a huge bust. But if he just can get on the field, he's at least RB4, potentially flex, potentially RB2 in PPR leagues because he's that good of a receiver. I love his talent, but he's got to get on the field.
Yeah, David Johnson, Bruce Arians said some, I don't want to say he said not nice things. He basically said if he doesn't play in camp, I'm not going to put him out there in a game.
Right.
It doesn't mean he trashed him. And the thing is, signing Chris Johnson, to me, that's not a – I don't know how much of a threat that is even to John. It's definitely not a threat to Ellington because Chris Johnson's no good anymore. Right. So he seems to be depth rather than – I mean, I don't think Bruce Arians is going, I'm going to follow my sword here and I'm not going to use David Johnson to prove a point about a rookie. But he's there for depth. So that at least that part is not scaring me away from David Johnson. I tend to think David Johnson could be a bit of a value pick at this point. If he was getting some – I used the word helium earlier. He was getting a lot of that, and I think you're going to see that going downward.
And that's what I love about it is I agree with you. Chris Johnson is depth because the thing is David Johnson isn't on the field. So you got to get some insurance out there if he never starts playing. But the best part about David Johnson, if he does get on the field, is he's such a good pass catcher. He can line up out wide. He's 6'1", 220, 230. He's in that range. He can line up as a receiver even if Ellington's in the backfield. And that's what I like about him is he could actually out-touch Ellington if he's 100% because he'll get wide receiver snaps along with carries in the backfield. I love his talent.
All right, Jake, what else you got going on? Where can people find your stuff? RotoExperts.com, like you said, your rankings went up today, Tuesday, right?
Yeah, they are up today on Tuesday. Fantasy Sports Network, I'm doing stuff. Got Daily Roto, got stuff going on over there. For the people still, like you and I, still playing baseball for the few people out there. But I also have some strategy articles for the football season before we even get started with that. So you can find me everywhere. I haven't got sleep. I'm sure you haven't either. It's that month. August means no sleep.
August and into September with baseball for me, I agree. It means no sleep at all. October 5th, I'm going to be a happy guy, I think. All right. Jake, thanks a lot for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know we'll do it again soon. So yeah, thanks definitely. A lot. All right, everybody. Again, Jake's at AllInKid on Twitter. I'm at JHalpin37. Again, please subscribe to the Fantasy 15 on both iTunes and SoundCloud and watch these Hangouts whenever you can. We'd love to hear what you think of them. So send me a tweet at JHalpin37. Again, let me know what you think. Also, if you want to start a league, join a league, do a lot of fantasy football research for your draft, foxsports.com/fantasy. Get over there right now. We've got plenty of stuff for you. You can mock with us. Podcast, Periscope chats on Thursdays, tons and tons of helpful stuff. And again, start your league or join a league over there right now. We'll be back with another podcast on Friday. Please come on back then. For Jake Ciely, I'm John Halpin. Thank you for watching and listening to the Fox Fantasy 15.